Hello?
Hey,
What's up?
hey, not a whole lot. What's going on?
Not much.
Oh, goodness.
Can you hear me?
I sure can. There we are. Hey, all right. Looks like you managed to get in. Was it, did you just have to do whatever it said to fix that?
No, I had to open it in Google Chrome.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I Googled it and said that there was something with Safari, so that works too.
Yeah.
Cool, cool, cool. All right. Oh, man. What have you guys been up to today? Anything?
Yeah, I was
Hello?
doing. Go for it, Mark. Hello.
Mark, what was that?
Yeah, I was doing a course online on Udemy
Uh-huh.
called "Understanding the Weird Parts of JavaScript."
Cool, cool, cool. All right, all right. How about you, Mark? What you been up to? Mark, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I was
Oh.
having a little trouble with hearing the audio.
All right, that's all right, that's all right. What you been up to today? Anything?
I just worked a little bit on some CSS and HTML. Just what do you call it? Making like tables, changing backgrounds, that sort of thing.
Good, good. Okay. Really cool. So I was working, I had a project for Lambda I had to do today. I was racking my brain on it for the past couple of days. So real quick, I'm just going to show you kind of what I had to do. Let me share my screen. Share my screen, entire screen. There we are. So this is what we had to build. Basically, we just had to build the JavaScript to make these trending topics here work. So this is kind of like a knockoff of Times, I think it is, or New York Times. So basically, the JavaScript right now it shows all of the topics here, and then it filters them based upon whatever the data set is. So these are all the topics relating to JavaScript, technology, Node.js, jQuery, and Bootstrap. Right? So this is like a little bit of like what you can do with JavaScript. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt though. This is the JavaScript for it. So I had to rack my brain on this and stuff. So this is just kind of, these right here are like different constructors, which you'll eventually learn about. And that kind of stuff. But yeah, so this is just kind of what I had to end up working on. So the good thing is they actually give you instructions, so they kind of tell you kind of what to do. Like they're saying, hey, you know, assign this tab element to the tab element DOM reference, which is what this is here. So you just kind of equal this to that, and then that way you can use it and stuff. With HTML, there's this thing called a custom data set, which you don't use in HTML. You only use for JavaScript, really, but it's these things here. So we use them called data tabs. So what you can do is you can grab things, you can grab like the topics with it. So anything with the data tab of Node is kind of put into its own list of things. So like if I come down here, these are the actual topics. So like this is linked to the JavaScript tab, this as well. So whenever I click on JavaScript here, everything with that data type or data set is added right here, for example. So,
Okay.
but those are like super advanced concepts, and it took me forever to understand those. But like I had to rewatch like the entire week's lectures again. They record all the lectures, and each lecture is about 2 hours long. So I literally spent an entire day just rewatching lectures. It was terrible, but I'm really glad I got this finished. It was terrible. But,
How long did it take you?
I've been working on it since Friday, so it took me about 2 days.
Uh,
Yeah, it took a while. And the thing that really irritates me about it is it's not really that much code, right? So it's like it's only like 62 lines of code, of JavaScript code, and it makes all that happen. But the thing is like kind of understanding you know, what all of these mean. Like you have to understand like this keyword. You know, the syntax can be a little tricky as well. You know, and all that. So it can be a little bit frustrating. So you want to talk about imposter syndrome. This probably gave me the biggest case of imposter syndrome that I've ever had. It was horrible. But that's just kind of what I was working on here, this last project. But what I wanted to do today is I wanted to spend, probably it's going to take us a good hour, probably. We'll see how far we can get with it. But what I want to do is I want to rebuild, using HTML and CSS, this past project of mine. Let me find it here. It is this. So we're going to use HTML and CSS, and we're going to rebuild this little website here. It's just a one-page static website. Right?
Okay.
So, there's a few things that I want to review, though, especially for you, Mark, because I know that you're not. I know that you really don't know a whole lot of CSS yet. So there's a few little things. I'm going to give you these links in the. I'm going to put these links in the chat, so you can take a look at these. So we're going to be using today. We're going to be using the CSS box model. And we're also going to be using Flexbox. Now, Flexbox is it's more of like an intermediate concept. The other way you do it is like with floats, but I hate floats and I don't fully understand floats because they're like, it's like a 2005 way of laying things out, right? It's just not optimal anymore. So I'm going to use Flexbox. So this is an awesome website that teaches you Flexbox, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the project and I'm going to give some like actual examples of this real quick. So let me take a look here. Most of that stuff I don't need. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this, and I'm just going to minimize this screen. I'm working on a 13-inch MacBook Pro, so I don't have that much screen real estate, unfortunately. So let me just get rid of a bunch of junk I don't need. So, and I'm going to eventually put this up on GitHub and give you guys the link to it. So if you want to grab the project yourself and look at it, we could definitely do that. I made, here it is right here, CodeBuddies project. So I kind of put like the images and everything in here. I'm using VS Code, by the way, as my text editor. So basically, the HTML is blank. The CSS is also mostly blank as well. The only thing really in here is the images we're using and the design files. So today we're going to be building only the desktop version. We'll see how much time we have left. We might do the mobile version. So desktop just looks like this. It's more spread out. We're going to use Flexbox to make this 3-column deal here and stuff. And float. We're also going to be able to float this stuff to the left and right. This here's the mobile version. Mobile version literally is just things stacked on top of each other. So we might build that later or something, but I'm going to focus on the desktop first. So the first thing I want to do is I want to kind of give a bit of an idea of the CSS box model. And the reason is because I don't know if you've really dealt much with margin and padding and borders and that stuff, but I'm definitely going to give some examples of that. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create the boilerplate, like the basic HTML. With a lot of text editors, if you just do an exclamation point and hit tab, it'll actually build it for you, just like that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do I'm just going to make a couple of boxes and just give them a color. And then we can see like what the margin and padding looks like. So we're going to go ahead here. We're just going to say h1 container first. h1 container, what am I doing? Let me do this. This actually might be easier. Container, and I'll just put a couple of these, and inside of this, I'll just put an H1, and I'll just say container 1, oops, and I'll just build 2 of these. And let me go ahead and open up my live server here. Okay. Put this here. Okay. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to give them a background color just so that we can kind of see them. We'll say background of red, so I like red. Oh, it didn't work. Is it because they don't have a height and a width? Ah, they don't want to work. Let's do this.
But that's all I remember.
Alright, let's see. Why? Oh, you know why? Because I'm a goofy person. I didn't link my CSS yet. Let's do that real fast. Index CSS, where is that? Is that in a folder? It is. Hang on. Alright, let's try this.
Charles.
So let's do H1. And let's do container. Aha, there we go.
I'm putting away again.
And let's do H1 and let's do container again. Let's do container 2. Just like so. All right, there we are. So basically, we just have kind of 2 containers there. Let me go ahead and let me give the H1 a font size just to make it bigger.
Bigger?
50 pixels each. So there we go. That's a lot bigger. So margin. The first thing I'm going to go over is margin. So you basically think of margin as it's the space between the elements, right? So if you have like 2 H1s side by side, like these right here are like literally on top of each other, right? There's no break there. If I put some margin in here, then it'll pull them away from each other. So let me just do like 20 pixels, something crazy. And then you see what happens is it put 20 pixels of it put 20 pixels of space above, to the left, to the right, and below it. So now they're apart from each other, right? So that's going to be margin. Padding, on the other hand, is space within the element. So do you see how, like, let's see, I think I have a thingy. Why isn't that working? It's annoying. There we go. So you see how, like, the C in the container is, like, pushed right up against the edge? To pull it away from that, we're going to be using padding. So now we'll do 20 pixels of padding. And now there's 20 pixels within the element. All right, so that's going to be the difference between margin and padding. So you're going to be seeing that a lot, like especially whenever we go to do like the navigation. So you have like, you know, the multiple types of navigation, you know, here, and here, and that's going to be margin there. So like there's going to be the margin is here. Doesn't want to. So there's margin there. There's margin there. There's margin there, and so on and so forth to kind of push them away from each other. Whereas you'll see, like for example, some of these within the containers might be like further away. Like right here, this is going to be padding, right? Because more than likely that top line there is going to be within that bottom part. So we're just going to put a bunch of top padding to push it from the top down, and also from the bottom as well. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a reference if you're not very familiar with margin and padding. I'm not sure how exactly familiar it is. But I will be, giving you guys the links to these as well. The other thing that I'm going to kind of go over a little bit is going to be Flexbox. And the reason is because I'm going to be using a lot of Flexbox. So let's say, for example, I have let's say I have a navigation. We're going to be definitely using this with navigation. So we have navigation, and we have, say, 4 links, 4 A tags, right? We'll do like home, about, contact, and something, right? So let's do that. So now we have our links here, home, about, contact, and something. So let's come into here, and let me go ahead and let me give these like a little bit of, I'll give these like a little bit of a font size just so they're easier to see. So we'll do font size, and we'll do like 30 pixels each, for example. That's just going to make it much bigger. So what we can do is we can go ahead here, and Flexbox has multiple things that we can do. So the first thing we need to do is call on the container, the parent container, in which case is nav, called display flex. And again, I'll be giving you guys these links as well, because I'm not going to be able to go into all this. This will be like 4 hours long. But if we give it display of flex, then we'll see that nothing really changed that much. But now that I gave it display of flex, I can go ahead here and I can give it some other attributes here as well, like for example, justify content. And I can do something like space between. And if I do space between, what it literally does is, because it's a display of flex, it gives equal spacing to push it out, to push them away from each other. So now I don't have to do like float left, float right, all that kind of stuff. Likewise, if, for example, like I showed you guys just a bit ago, the mobile version, this makes it really good for mobile, because oftentimes what you're going to have is a lot of times you'll see, like for hamburger menus on some websites, where you click the hamburger menu and like these links are now like up and down, right? So instead of having to do anything crazy, what you could literally do is there is an attribute that you can put on these called flex direction. So by default, they're set to be in rows, but you can also do flex direction column, and it automatically stacks on top of each other, for example. And there's a few other things as well, like we can also change the order as well. So for example, if you wanted, for whatever reason, for something to go into the number 1 place, you can definitely do that. If I gave, for example, this one here a class of just something, and then I can come in here and I can grab that class of something, and I can say order, and I can say -1, for example, and that would put something to the very top, and that would just push everything else down. So this just makes things a lot easier, as far as, especially like whenever you're going from like, that way you don't have to create like 2 different websites. That way you don't have to create a mobile website and a desktop website. You only have to create one website and just change like the direction, for example. So that's going to be a few things that we're going to be kind of looking at doing. And I'm going to go and paste those now, just in case you want to take a look at them while we're doing this. So, because I don't know what the heck I'm doing, give me a minute. Okay. All right, there we are. Right, so that's for Flexbox. And this is document object. Oh, box model. There we go. All right. Now, I am going to be using some really, really cool. Wait, where'd my thingy go? There it is. So I am going to be using a few really neat plugins that you can get for your browser that I'm definitely going to show you guys. These things are really cool. So the first one that I have here, I got to see what I got to figure out what the name of it is, but basically it just allows you to type in whatever size of the window you want, and it will adjust the size of the window. So like, for example, if all of a sudden you're working on like an iPhone 5 or something, if you just click that, it'll automatically resize it. So it looks exactly like an iPhone 5, for example. I'm just going to do 1,000 pixels wide at least. The other one that I'm going to be using a lot of, and this thing is really neat, this allows you to do an overlay. This allows you to overlay like a PNG image over top of your code. That way you can match it. So you can actually, if I unlock this, I can actually scroll up or scroll down, and it changes the opacity. So this is what mine looks like completely, and this is what it's going to look like eventually. So what you can do is you can do like half opacity, and you can actually see, okay, my navigation needs to be down here and spread out this much. Mine's all the way up here. So I can literally, in my code, just tweak the margin and the padding, and you can actually see it automatically adjust on here until it's about perfect. This is called Pixel Perfect. It's a Google Chrome plugin. So if you actually find like images of things that you want to that you're building, all you do is you just go into here and you just click on the layer spot, and then you just find whatever image you want, and then you could just toss it in there and overlay, which is definitely really cool. That way you're not like killing yourself for an hour just trying to get like the padding or margin absolutely perfect. That's really not a good way to do it. So the very first thing that I want to do with this is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make this look exactly perfect. There we go. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to go over what I have in my index.css file right now. This is just a reset. This is to make sure that like if you've ever looked at, and I'll go ahead and comment it out just to kind of prove the point. But if HTML elements have its own like padding and margin and stuff already on it. The problem with that is if you're not viewing it in Google Chrome, if like you open it up in like Safari, it might look slightly different. There might be like an extra like 3 pixels of padding in Safari as opposed to Google Chrome. So we do this reset so it looks exactly the same regardless of what browser you're viewing it on. So like if I just put an H1 in here that says hello, you'll notice that there's a little bit of margin or padding. Actually, you can see what it is if you go into inspect on Google Chrome and you actually just kind of hover over it. You can actually see that that is margin. If you actually go in here into the inspect element, it'll actually show you the box model right now. And it'll tell you that there is 13.400 pixels of margin on top and bottom automatically. But we don't want that because we want it to, we want to be able to control all of that ourselves instead of fighting with it. So if we do the reset, then all of a sudden it's, all the font weight, margin, padding is all just completely gone. Now we have full control over this thing, just as an example. So literally all it does is it just says pretty much every single element, get rid of the margin, get rid of the padding, border, font size is going to be the same, all that good stuff. It's going to set one line height to everything as well, because some browsers do like 1.2 or something crazy. The only thing that I added in here was image max width 100%. So if you've ever had like an image and it makes your browser scroll to the right, like it's way too big width-wise, if you just set the max width to 100%, it'll never scroll, it'll never become more than 100% of its container. So like I can actually probably demonstrate that just in case. So let's go ahead and we'll just create an image. And main is probably main header, I'd imagine. So img, right? And it is main header.png. again, toss this in here. Let's see. Yep, there it is, right there. So for example, if I make this super duper teeny, then you'll see like sometimes it'll scroll real weird. Let me. Oh no, it won't because I didn't save it. There we go. So now you'll see like there's a big scrolling bar for one weird reason. If you don't want that, if you just go ahead and say like if I make it super tiny, so it does scroll like that. If I go ahead and I uncomment this and say okay, never be more than 100%, it'll go ahead and adjust it. So no matter what happens, if I make it big or small, it will never become too big. Just kind of like as a general rule. So that's something that I always put in there because sometimes you get like images from the internet that's like 4,000 by 2,000 pixels or something crazy, and the image is like ridiculously huge. So, so that's just kind of what I have thus far with my CSS. Other than that, though, we are completely and totally blank. So we have it. We're just going to start right here. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is we're going to look at the website. We're going to break it up into like sections. So I give you guys like an idea of like how I'm thinking about it, and we'll go ahead and we'll start coding the HTML. So this here is going to be the website. Let me go ahead and make sure because I have it at 1,000 pixels. There we go. So this is what the website's going to look like. Probably one of the first things that you're gonna recognize is that everything is in line. There is space. Stupid thing. There is this space here. So there is a width. So there is what's called like a container. So everything is in line with this. This is, everything is perfectly in line. The only thing that's not in line is the header. So I would say like this whole piece right here is header, but you can see that the header reaches all the way across the screen. You see how it has like this odd colored white, and it stretches all the way across, whereas everything else is contained within a container. So what that means is that I'm going to make a header, and the header is going to be outside of the main container. Right, because if it was inside the container, it would be like the footer here that its odd background color would only reach this far, whereas we want the thing to reach completely across. So that's number one. So basically, the way that I'm going to look at it is we're going to do first the header, which is going to be this whole big thing right here at the top. Inside the container, we're going to have two things. We're going to have the logo, which I'm just going to make like an H1 or something. That's going to be, this is the logo. And then this whole thing here is the nav. And I'm going to show you why I'm going to do it that way. I'm actually going to be using Flexbox to stack it on top of each other like that, which is going to be super, super easy. After that, we're going to have I'm actually going to make this its own thing. I'm just going to call this like, big image or something like that. But this whole image here, this is going to be its own thing. I'll eventually probably try to make it like a background image, but I'm not very familiar with background images, so I'm going to start with just regular image. And we'll work back from there. And then after that, once we're done that, we're going to go ahead here and we're going to make this. This here is going to be its own thing. It's going to be like, I'm going to call it like main or something. So all of this is going to be its one big section, basically. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to break it up so that this has its own container. The images have their own container, and then this part does down here as well. And again, it's just going to be because I'm going to display flex this to make the header and the content stack on top of each other, whereas the images, I'm going to put the images obviously side by side. So the best way to think about these is, think about like a website, is break it up. It's just a bunch of squares, right? And then obviously we're going to have like the lower section down here. This is all one big section here. And then also too, this is a section, and the picture is a section as well. And again, what we can do is we can display flex that, so we can put display flex on the lower container here, and that'll allow us to put these two sections side by side. And then it'll also allow us to call display flex on this container as well here, so that we can stack all these on top of each other. And then, the footer is very basic. You just put some copyright in there. So that's how I'm going to be kind of thinking about this. Is header at the top. We're going to be just having we're going to have like a big H1 with the logo there, and then the nav under that. Spread the navigation out. The image is just going to be by itself. The lift off and everything within that is going to be like the main section. And there's going to be the lift off, and the content is going to be its own subsection. The pictures are going to be their own subsection, and then the Can We Visit Planets and its content are going to be its own section ultimately. So, yeah. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I want to do, let me actually close that. And I want to make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Wish I had a second screen. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So, let's go ahead first and let's, I'm going to adjust the opacity on this a bit. Actually, let's just get rid of this completely. Actually, no, let's not. Let's do it this way first. So here's what it's supposed to look like. So what we're going to do first is we're going to put in the header. So I'm just going to use header. And again, inside the header, there's two things. There is the logo, which I'm just going to call an H1 and give it a class of logo. And then there's the navigation. So it's going to do that right now. Let's do H1 with the class of, oh no, not logo. We'll do brand. How about that? Brand. And it's going to say, what is it? Spacewalkers. And I'm also going to go ahead as well, and I'm actually going to, actually, let me just do it this way. Spacewalkers. And then after we have that, we have the actual navigation with the multiple navigations in there. How many do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you don't know, there's built into a lot of text editors, there's this plugin called Emmet. VS Code, I think, comes with its own proprietary one, but it allows you to do things like it allows you to do math to create your like elements and stuff like that. So I'm going to do A times 5. So I'm going to create 5 A tags, and if you just hit tab, it just makes them all for you. I'm just going to go ahead here and put a hashtag in these so they don't go nowhere right now. And we're going to go ahead and it's going to say home. I'm going to do something interesting with these. We're going to use what's called text transform to actually give it that capitalized look. So I'm actually going to write it in lowercase just to give us a little bit of CSS stuff to do. So we're going to do about us, blog, contact, and sign in. And that is going to be our, that's just going to be our header. So let's go ahead and save it, and let's take a look and see what it looks like. It looks ugly as sin. So that looks absolutely nothing like this. Not at all. So if I actually go ahead, and the cool thing about this overlay thing is you can do like half opacity or whatever. So this is ours right up here, and this is what it should look like. So we'll go ahead, when we get to the CSS, we're going to fix all of that. So we're going to get rid of these stupid underlines, change the color, change the font weight and the font size, all that good stuff. So yeah. So once we're done with that, now that our header is done, we're going to go ahead and add this image in. Now I'm going to go ahead and remember, like I said, the header. Turn it off. Turn it on. The header reaches all the way across. It has this super, super light background. However, everything else is just aligned, with a bit of a what do you call it, like an indent. So what we're going to do to make that happen, that indent happen, is we're going to put this in a container, the rest of everything else in a container, and we're going to give that container a max width of probably about 85%. So what that's going to do is that's just going to, kind of give us that edge look there. So with a container, you normally just use a div for it. You can call it container or wrapper. I think most of the time people call it wrapper. Let's call it wrapper. So everything else from the website is going to go within the wrapper, and it's also not a bad idea to comment this stuff, because when you start getting a lot of sections and a lot of divs, you're going to get really confused real quick. So we're going to say end of wrapper. Okay. So the very first thing that I want to do is we're going to add the image. And we're going to give this, let's give it a class. And let's just give it a, let's just call it, let's just call it like space image or something, just to kind of, because what I want to do ultimately is we're going to give this a width of 100%. So you can see how these images here are much smaller, whereas this one reaches the full, this one right here reaches the full width of our container. So we're going to go ahead and figure out, I don't remember what the name of that image was. Let's find out. So source is going to be, it's in the image folder, so you type img / to get into that image, and that is main-header.png. So let's go ahead and we will save that, and we'll notice that there it is. That is perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now that that looks equally as ugly, let's go ahead and let's take a look here. After that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a main section. And the main section is going to have 3 things in it. So let's go ahead here and let's call that, let's say, we're going to call it main. And we're just going to call it like main section, for example. And inside the main section, there's going to be 3 different containers. The first thing is going to be there's going to be an H2 that's going to be called liftoff and a P tag with content. So that's going to be its own thing. The thing after that, we're going to go ahead and have these 3 images. So we're going to have a container of those 3 images. And then the final thing, just like the very first one, we're going to have another container with an H2 in it for can we visit other planets, and a P tag with the text in it. So let's go ahead and let's do that. It'll make a bit more sense. I don't know if I'm explaining it well or not, but hopefully it makes more sense. So let's go ahead here and let's make a section tag, and we'll give it a class of let's do, actually no, let's not give it a class, because that's definitely something that we're going to need to take a look at with CSS. So we're going to go ahead here and we are going to say, actually, yeah, let's go ahead and do that actually. Class equals main. Yeah, let's actually do that. Let's just get rid of this. We don't need the class for main section. Okay. I need to put in that there. Okay. So we have a main, which is going to be this huge part there, and then we're going to have a section called main section, which is going to have the upper part. We're going to have the image section, which is going to have the 3 images, and then we're going to have another main section that looks exactly like the first one. So we're going to do H2, and we're going to say H2 it says liftoff in it. So we'll say, actually, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to do it all in lowercase, and then we're going to use CSS to do the uppercase, just to give us some more practice with CSS. So liftoff, and then the P tag. I don't think that I can grab. Let me see. Hold on, fast. We got. Okay. Another neat thing that we can do within a text editor is we can do this. It'll give us some dummy text. We'll do lorem 50. And if we do lorem 50 and then tab, it gives us just a bunch of Latin dummy text that we can use instead of having to type all that out. Okay, and that's what that looks like. So now we have our main section, and we have a subsection in there called liftoff. Let's go in here, and we'll do some more commenting, and we'll say end of main section. And I'm actually going to copy this because well, actually, no, screw it. We'll do it this way. I'm going to do another section below this, and I'm going to give that a class of image dash section, because this is where our 3 images are going to go. So we're going to do img times 3. Just like so. So we need to grab these 3 images. I don't know what these images are called, so we got to look. Blast, that's the first one. Okay, so we're going to go ahead here. We're going to say img blast.png is the first one. The second one is img dash sky.png is the second one, and then the last one is, I'm assuming, liftoff. Not liftoff, launch.png. So if I go ahead and take a look at what we got, and now we just added our 3 images. Actually, and something that I did just realize we got to do is we probably, in our reset, we also got to probably remove that margin or padding, because you see how there's like a sliver of stuff there. That might cause us some issue later. But we'll see. Let's take a look, see if that's something we can see easily. If we scroll down here, it should show us our box model. There it is. And it doesn't show us, but that's okay. No big deal. We'll deal with that later. Okay. And then the last thing that we got to do within this main section here is we're basically just going to copy that the next section as well, the main section. So let's go ahead here, and we're going to say section.main section. That'll give us a class, the section with the class of main section. Since they're identical, there's going to be an h2 in here. And this is going to say, can we visit other planets? Right? No, can we visit planets? Can we visit planets? And then the next thing we want to do is we want some more dummy text as well. Now, what we can see here is that there are actually, it looks like there's actually 2 paragraphs in here, so we can actually do that. That's no problem. So we'll say, how many do we think this is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 18, 19. We'll say there's roughly 20. So we'll say we want lorem 20 for each. And we'll just copy that, and we'll just make 2 paragraphs. That way it looks authentic. So now we have, at the top, we have our header. We have the very top image. We're going to have the main section, which is this huge, huge thing that runs all the way across. And in that main section, we have 3 subsections. We have our top main section, our image section, and another main section as well. So that looks good. So then not the last thing, we got one more thing to do other than the footer, and that is going to be this section here. So this is going to be, the way that I'm looking at this is going to be, if I can get this stupid draw thingy to work, this is going to be one big section. Pardon my drawing, I'm using a trackpad. One main section divided into 2 subsections. On the right, all that's in that subsection is just the image. On the left, this subsection is divided up into 4 things. We have an H2, we have 1 paragraph, we have a 2nd paragraph, and we have a button, which we're actually going to use an A tag and just style it as a button, since that's kind of the best way to do it. So this is kind of how we're gonna look at this. So let's go ahead here. I'm going to leave that up, even though it's a terrible drawing that probably makes absolutely no sense. And actually, it's drawn on my screen, so I can't keep it. We're going to go ahead. I'm actually going to make this a bit bigger so we can see it easier. So we're going to make this, it's going to be, remember, below the main tag, right? Because the main tag is everything from liftoff all the way down here to the bottom of the can we visits. So that's the main tag. So we want to be below the main tag, but still within the wrapper. So let's go down a couple. And we're going to make a section, and we're just going to call it lower section. And inside of lower section, remember we're going to have two subsections. We can actually in HTML there's actually a tag that you use here. It's called article. So an article is any combination of things within a section. So you have like section is the big thing, and then article is like the group of things within the section. So we'll go ahead here and we'll say article. And in the very first article, we're going to have 4 things. We're going to have one H2, 2 paragraphs, and 1 A tag. So we're going to have H2, and it says, let's go for a walk. The next thing is we're going to have 2 P tags. So I'm just going to do P times 2. And what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hell with it. We'll just do 45. Oops, lorem 45. Just like that. And we'll just do the exact, we'll do something slightly different. We'll do like lorem 39, just so it doesn't look exactly the same. And that's kind of what we're going to have. Okay. So we have here, we have let's go for a walk. Oh wait, what happened? Oh, I goofed somewhere. Where the heck did I screw this up at? Oh no, I didn't. I'm good. Sorry, I need to space these out so it looks a little bit better. There we go. Okay. 39. There we go. This just makes it read a little bit easier. So now we have, let's go for a walk, and then we have our 2 paragraphs, or 2 distinct paragraphs with it. After that, we're going to have an A tag, pretty much a button. So let's go in here, and let's take a look. What does the button say? It says, sign up. So we're just going to say, oops, lowercase, sign up. And it's not going anywhere. So now at this point, we have everything that we need. There's just a little terrible, ugly looking sign up button, but that's okay. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a second article, still again within that same section. And then this, all that's going to be in there is just that picture, just the astronaut picture. So we just made all this here. Now we're going to go ahead and throw in that picture. And you can actually notice with the picture as well, and actually with all the pictures, you can see they have like slightly rounded corners. So we are going to do a little bit of border radius on, I think, just about every one of these. So if you haven't really messed with CSS that much, especially border radius, it makes it just so that you can round your edges out and stuff. So it looks a little more natural and not so, 1999. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to do article again. And in the article, all that's in this is an image. So we just have to figure out what the image is called. So img / and it is going to be spacewalk, I'm assuming. Let's double check and make sure. Yep, and there's our picture. Okay. After that, the very last HTML we have to do is the footer, which the footer is stupid simple. All it has in there is just copyright, I think, right? Copyright Spacewalkers 2018. So we can easily do that. Still, again, within the footer, or within the wrapper, I'm sorry, because you can see how that has that light gray background and it's indented like pretty much everything else other than the header. Let's go ahead here and let's double do that. Let's do footer. And inside the footer, I'm just going to make this I'm going to call it an H3, I guess. No, you know what? We'll just call it an H2. We can do footer H2 for it. and it's just going to say copyright Spacewalkers 2018, just like so. And that, boys and girls, is our website. We're done. We can now, charge somebody $10,000 for this ridiculously ugly website. So we're done. That is it. That is all of the HTML. Pretty simple. Do you guys have like any questions or comments with this? Mark, does any of this look familiar to you?
Yeah, it does.
Does? Good. Okay. Beautiful. All right. So yeah, probably the most important thing when doing any website, and again, this is a stupid, like very simple website, but like once you get into more difficult websites, you're going to start to kind of like look at it like, okay, it's just a bunch of squares within squares within squares. So probably the easiest way to do it is just to kind of look at it like I did and just break it up and just say, okay, this is a section, that is a section, and then inside that section is like another section with these or, with this or that. And that really, really helps. The worst thing is try not to get too like overwhelmed, because it does look very intimidating, like when you first look at it. But and that's with everything. Like when you start learning JavaScript too, like that's actually the first thing that they tell you is before you write any JavaScript, look at the HTML, look at the CSS. That way. That way, at least then it looks somewhat familiar, so it gives you a better idea. So like if I said, hey, I want you to grab the images and put them into their own variable, you might be like, what the hell are you talking about? But when you actually look at the HTML, you're like, oh, okay, you mean these 3 images here, or something like that. We're making these disappear or reappear or something with the click of a mouse or something. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Now the fun part is CSS, because now we can actually see things happen, which is really, really cool. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to give our container a width. And again, the container is everything other than the header. So these right here are indented. So there's 2 main things to remember when you're giving something a width. 2 big things. The first thing is the width itself. So let's go ahead and just say width of 85%. I like using percents because they're easier to understand. So basically we're just saying we want it to be 85%. We want it to be what, 15% indented on either side, for example. So it's going to take up 85% of the window. Now, if we save it and look at it, we now see something. We now kind of see something happen. And that is, let me actually see here. I want to double check and make sure. A little fast. Oh no, we didn't call it container. I'm sorry, we called it wrapper. It's like, why didn't it work? Wrapper. There we go. So what you can see though is that basically what it did is it cut off 15% on the right side, right? That's not what we want though. We want it to be evenly spaced. We want it to be 85%, but we want it to be aligned in the middle. So that's where the second trick comes into play, and that's margin, right? So there's a trick where if you do margin, you do 0, auto. Now, if you haven't really looked at margin before, the way margin works is the margin takes in 4 values by default, and you think of it clockwise. So for example, if I say 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels. This is the way that margin and padding looks, right? It takes in 4 values. And the way that it works is it works clockwise. So the very first value is top. So think of it as margin top. And then it goes margin right, margin bottom, margin left. So think of it like a clock, right? So what I'm doing here is, and there's a shortcut way of doing it, whereas if you just give it 2 values, the first value applies to top and bottom. The second value applies to left and right. Okay? So the trick that I'm using here is margin 0 auto. So what that means is there's no margin on the top and bottom, But auto means that on the left and right, it automatically calculates it. So there's even margin on the left and right. So now, if I save it, now it gives me an equal amount of width on the left and right. So now it's 85% in the middle, not just 85% from the right. Right. So that's going to kind of take care of our wrapper, at least. And we may have to adjust that. Like, for example, if I actually go in here and look now, and now I can actually do an overlay. And if I actually want to, it might be easier to look at it this way. We'll give it a background color just so we can see it. For example, we'll give ours a background color of blue. And let's bring you back up here. And let's unlock it and let's take a look at it whenever it's kind of one-to-one. So it's actually, their width is significantly smaller, so it's not even 85%. It's probably something like 82%. So like if you see, theirs is right here, whereas ours is like way back here. So let's like try 80% and see what it looks like. So let's see if that looks any different from ours. And that's actually perfect. So you can see that ours lines up exactly where theirs lines up. See that? So this is what theirs looks like, and this is what mine looks like. So the width is perfect on the wrapper. So they're using a width of 80%. So this is a super awesome tool. Otherwise, you would have to like flip back and forth between the image and your image and see like how they compare and stuff. It's a nightmare. So this is a really, really cool plugin to use. So that's beautiful. That's exactly what we want. So let's look at, let's go ahead here and look at ours. Let's just turn this off here. Look at ours. We'll get rid of that ugly background color because actually the wrapper doesn't have a background color. But what does have a background color is the header. So the way that I like to look, or the way that I like to work with my CSS is I like to work top to bottom. And the way that I do that is I make comments. And you can kind of make it look any way you want. I like it this way just because it looks nice. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm just going to say header. And here is where all of my header CSS goes. So the way that I'm going to work it is I'm going to basically say I'm going to do the HTML for the header first, and then we'll go down to this image here, which is really not much we need to do to it, and then we'll go down to main and just work our way down with the CSS. So for the header, there's a few things that we need to do. The first thing that we need to do is give it that background color, because it does have a background color. It's a very off-white. So let's start with that. Let's say background color. And it's, I don't know exactly, I'll probably have to pull up like some sort of a color picker or something like that, but we'll just say like light gray. It's way too dark, but at least then it gives us some contrast. So the cool thing is that we had that effect of the header goes all the way across the screen, whereas everything in the container is kind of indented. So it gives us that cool effect that they're using here on theirs. The next thing we're going to need to do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to do the font sizes or font actually a little later because they use some sort of Google fonts, but it doesn't tell me what Google font they used, so I don't really know exactly. I can try to find it. Oops. Let's see, font, Google font. But that's like a little bit more of like an intermediate CSS, so we'll probably just add fonts later. But I just want to see if they use something like some sort of space-themed font or something. No. So we could just grab a different one later or something. Okay. So let me go ahead here and let me resize my window. Oh no. Shoot, it sometimes does that. Sometimes the plugins will kind of glitch out a bit. I don't know why it does that. We're going to do it again. Maybe not. Cool. There we go. 1,000 pixels. Pull you all the way down. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to concentrate on. Yeah. So the next thing I'm going to concentrate on here is the font size. Actually, no. That's basically what we're going to need to do. That's really one of the only things we need to do for the header is just give it the background color. The other thing we have to do is give it a display of flex, because that's going to allow us to manipulate what's inside the container. Remember how I said that you do display flex on the parent container? So what that looks like is if you run display flex, where is it? Here it is. You do display flex on the header, and it allows you to manipulate the children of header. There's only two children of header, the H1 brand and the navigation. That's what we want. In this case, we want them stacked on top of each other. And we also want them to be aligned in the center. So Flexbox does a really cool thing that it allows you to easily center things. That's the most important thing about Flexbox. So we're going to do display of flex. We are going to, now once we do a display of flex, let's see here, where's ours? So you see here first that they are currently stacked on top of each other by themselves. If we do display of flex, Flexbox, flex direction on Flexbox is by default, let me actually close this. There we go. Flexbox's flex direction is default row. So it's going to automatically, like you see here, put them side by side. Now, that's a good thing because most websites that you look at actually have, like if we look at like Lambda, for example, like if I do like learn.lambda, their website is set up like this, where everything is side by side by side. That's where Flexbox is really, really good. Like this is their brand. This is equal to our spacewalkers. This is their brand. There's, in this case, I think it's a picture or like an image. So like a lot of websites having, you know, their menu for desktop version is side by side. If we look at like, for example, ESPN.com. Their navigation, now currently their navigation is in a mobile view. I think if I pull this, does it change or no? Okay. Well, that's a bad example. Unfortunately, my poor computer is under a lot of stress right now because I'm like doing a bunch of different things on it. But basically, you kind of get the point. A lot of things like Facebook and stuff like that will actually have their navigation side by side. Flexbox is perfect for that. But in our case, we don't want it side by side. We want them on top of each other, and we want them centered. So we're going to go ahead here. We're going to change the flex direction. So they're on top of each other. So we want it to be in a column. So now if I save it and look, now they're back on top of each other. Now you may be kind of thinking, well, what the hell's the point of this? Because they were on top of each other to begin with. The point comes down to if you've ever tried to center text, it's a giant pain in the butt. Text is very hard to center, and inside, like this kind of thing, to center them perfectly. You have to adjust the margin, and it's crazy. With Flexbox, though, you can do. There's a few different things that we can do to center things. The first thing is justify content. Now, if we do justify content and we do center, nothing really changes. Simply because you know, we're kind of with Flexbox, and you'll have to take a look at this on your own, or maybe I'll do a video on this at some point. But when you do flex direction of column, it flips the axes a little bit. But if I had, like, for example, a height to this, we'll say 200 pixels, for example, that'll give it a height. Justify content centers it vertically in this case. So if I actually didn't have justify content, it would just be slam up to the top, right? Traditionally, if I wanted to center it vertically, I'd basically have to go and I'd have to do margin top, and I'd have to give it an absurd amount of margin top to push it down. But in this case, instead of having to do that, I can just do justify content center. The next thing that I'm going to do, I think it's align items. Align items in this case should be what tosses it and the center, which it does. There we go. So with one command, I can horizontally center things. In this case, again, if I wanted to center these things, there is a text-align center, but that doesn't always work when you're dealing with like parents and stuff. So sometimes you just have to put like an absurd amount of margin, like equal margin on the left and right, and it can be a giant pain in the butt. So that's not what we want to do. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to center it. I'm going to get rid of this height because, yeah. So you can see now that they are like that. Now, at this point, the only thing we need, we're pretty much done with the header, I believe now. The thing we need to do now is we need to get inside of the two children. We need to make our brand, our Spacewalkers brand, we need to make that font size drastically bigger. And we also need to adjust the font size and the margin of our links as well to spread those out, because this is what it's supposed to look like here. And ours looks nothing like it. The other thing to note as well, actually no, we need one more thing in header. You'll notice that there is some padding in the header. So you see how like Spacewalkers, above Spacewalkers, there is some of that discoloration, some of that background color. Ours doesn't have that because it's basically just bumped all the way up. So what we can do to fix that is we can go in here and we can do padding, and we can do something like what can we do? We can do something like 30 pixels all around, for example. And you see basically what happens with that is it throws 30 pixels up above it, 30 pixels below it, and technically it also does 30 pixels left and right as well. We're going to have to play with the padding because the padding is going to have to be adjusted as we adjust the font size. Because as we adjust the font size, it's going to push further from the top as well. So we're going to have to play with that number. So we can't give it a hard number right now. But 30 pixels looks okay right now. And that looks good. So the next thing that I want to do actually is I want to adjust my brand. I think is what I gave the class of, right? Brand or branding? Brand. So I'm going to go ahead, in order to grab a class, so to grab just a regular, if you're not terribly familiar with CSS, to grab just a regular selector, you just type in the name of the selector. In this case, it's just header. If you want to get a class, you put a period before it. So this is saying dot brand. So this is saying a class of brand. So let's go ahead and let's grab the brand. And there's a few things that we need to do with the brand. Probably the biggest thing is I gotta make it bigger because it is way too darn small. So we're gonna use font size. And we're gonna do, sorry, 50 pixels. 50 pixels is way too damn big, I think, but let's see. Yeah, it looks better. Looks a heck of a lot better. Now it looks, like an actual logo or brand. So let's take a look and see. How close did I get? Or not at all? Mine is way too big. And you can also see, too, there's also a lot less padding as well. So you can see that this here is what it's supposed to look like. Mine is way too far down. And that's going to be with the padding that we put on the header. So we're going to go ahead here and we're going to reduce that significantly. Let's try 10 pixels one time and let's see what happens. Let's go ahead and give her another go. And that actually looks just about spot on as far as padding goes. You can see how our header is still way too big. And it's also the wrong font as well. So it's going to look a little different. But you can basically see that they're just about lined up. So we just have to, they're lined up they're vertically lined, which is kind of what we're looking for. And this is also a good opportunity to kind of talk about margin as well. You can see how the way they're supposed to look, the navigation is further down from that. So this would be a good case for margin here. So what we're going to ultimately want to do is when we get to the navigation, we're going to do a margin top to push that away from our branding. So let's go ahead here. Let's adjust our font size. Let's just take it down to like 30 pixels. Again, they don't have to be absolutely perfect, but we want them to be as accurate as possible. Just so it looks somewhat okay. So let's try 40, and that looks a-okay. Let's go ahead and adjust the font weight, and we're going to make it bold, just because theirs looks bold. And font weight, basically, just like it says, if I reduce this down, let me pull you away some, go down here. So for example, the difference between, so that's just like regular font weight, that's probably like 300 font weight, but bold just makes it thicker, kind of like how they have it. They have a bolded font weight on theirs. And that, I believe, is going to basically be it. Other than the actual font itself, which we'll eventually try to change somehow to match it a little better. Other than that, though, it looks as identical as possible. So let's actually take a look and see. And yeah, pretty much right, spot on. It looks like there might be some letter spacing. So like. You can see kind of like the letters are spaced a little different. Now that can either be because of spacing, or it could just be the font, the actual font. I'm not going to mess with it because I'm pretty sure it's just the type of font that's used, and we'll have to mess with that probably at a later date. So yeah, looks good. Other than the color is way off and stuff. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move down to the navigation next. Let's go here and let's grab our nav. All right. Now, what do we want to do with the nav? Probably the thing that I want to do more than anything with the nav is I want to give it margin and get it to be so that it's not so butted up against the this here. So I'm going to give it a little bit of margin, not a lot, simply because we're going to need to adjust the font size and all of that of the A tags, which is going to play a really big part. But let's go ahead and let's do like top and we only want top and bottom margin, so let's do like 10 pixels top and bottom. You can see basically what that does is that pushes this further down. It pushes this away from the bottom away from the navigation, and it also pushes to the top as well. So now we have top and bottom margin. And as far as I can see, that's pretty much all we need to do with the navigation. The thing that always tripped me up when I was first learning was, like, for example, the font size, right? I was like, okay, well, there's things inside the navigation, so I'm putting the font size on the items inside the navigation. So I would do things like font size, and I would say like 20 pixels, for example. And while that does work, it's actually best, because sometimes it doesn't work exactly like you would want it to. It's actually best to put the font size and everything on the actual A tags themselves. Same thing with like margin as well. Like you would assume like, okay, if I want these A tags to push away from each other, at least I thought for the longest time I would put the margin on the navigation, but then I would play with it for a while and realize it never worked. Couldn't figure out why. It's because we're not pushing the navigation away. We're actually pushing the A tags away from each other. So we actually have to put that on A tag. So we're going to say here within the navigation are our A tag, our A tags. And this is where we're going to go ahead and we are going to put the font size. We're also going to put the margin as well. But the very first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to get rid of that underline. So in order to do that, there is, I believe this is it, right? Let me double check. Yeah, okay. I didn't want to shoot my mouth off without double checking because I could be wrong. Text decoration. Text decoration is going to be underlines and all kinds of other junk as well. I'm sure we can look up a huge list of things. There's things like underlines and I don't know what they call like overlines and stuff, all kinds of craziness, but I don't like them, so I'm going to get rid of them. The next thing we want to do is change the color, because we don't want them to be that blue color, so we'll just give it black for now. Change colors to black. This is also the thing that I wanted to talk about as well. I believe they're capitalized in the real thing, right? Yeah, they're capitalized. So see how the first letter in each of them is capitalized, whereas I have them all lowercase. I did that on purpose because there is a CSS function called, oh my god, what is the name of it? Text. Oh my god. What the hell's the freaking name of it? Hang on, give me a minute. Shoot. I gotta Google this. Oh my god. I totally have a brain fart. Let's see. Text transform. Holy crap, text transform. That's what I want. Text transform. And inside of text transform, you have several options. You have uppercase, lowercase, capitalize, and I think some other ones as well. We're going to use capitalize. And basically what that does is that just capitalizes the first letter in each word, right? Now, the reason why I hard-coded the capitalization in the spacewalkers is because spacewalkers is one word. If I did capitalized in spacewalkers, it would have only capitalized the S. Whereas down here, we have like about us, and there's a space between about and us. So they're two different words, and it's going to capitalize the first letter in each word. So that's going to give us that. And we're going to use that as well in like liftoff and can we visit planets and all those as well. Text transform. There's nothing wrong with hard coding it. It's just they kind of discourage hard coding things as much as possible because like what if a client comes back later and was like, hey, you know, can we just do uppercase everything? In which case you would have to go into this HTML and like, you know, rewrite all of that in fully uppercase. Whereas with CSS, you just go to the CSS file, say text transform uppercase, and all of a sudden, it's just all uppercase. You know, so you just do it in one place. But in this case, we're using capitalize. The next thing is going to be the font size because they are tiny. So we want to do font size of 26, holy crap, 16 pixels. And that'll just make them bigger. We're probably also going to want to do the font weight as well, but before I mess with that, I want to do the margin. So let's go ahead here, and the margin is only going to be on the left and right. You don't put margin on the top, otherwise it's going to push it away from navigation, and we don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and do margin left and right. So top and bottom is 0 because we don't want any on the top and bottom, and then the second value is going to be for left and right. So if we do, for example, 10 pixels, it's going to give 10 pixels of space on the left and right of each one of those A tags. It's going to push them apart. So let's take a look and see how we're doing. Up a little bit. Okay. So it looks like that there's actually even more margin on the top of navigation. So we're going to go ahead and increase. So we're going to go back to nav here. We're going to increase this to, we'll say, like 16 pixels, for example. And you see it just pushed it down some. We need even more. So let's go ahead and do like 19. Even more than that. 22 pixels. And that's actually damn near perfect. The only thing that is not perfect is going to be the margin, it looks like. The margin is not quite there on that. So we're actually going to want even more margin. So we see how, like, for example, here, there's our C is way back here, whereas their C is way over here. So that just means that we have to push it further that way. So we want a little bit more margin left and right on the A tags now. So we go ahead and do that. It pushed over a little more. Let's do 17. It's a little too much. Back to 16. And we're going to leave it there, just because that's about as perfect as possible. I mean, look at that. You have like a little bit of bleeding, but that could be because of the font that they're using, the font weight, which we can also adjust the font weight as well. Let me actually drop this to like 14 pixels, and then I actually want to adjust the font weight to make it a little bit more bolded. So normally I think they're about 300. Let's do 400. Actually, let's see what that actually looks like. 600? Yeah. Let's do 600 just because I said so. So let's go ahead and let's stick with that. And that actually looks about spot on, I believe. I think ours actually, because we adjusted the font weight, it makes everything a little bit wider. So we actually need to adjust the margin. We actually need to pull our margin down a little bit because you can kind of see, or actually no, we need to actually increase our margin because you can see that ours, is it increase or decrease? Decrease, I'm sorry. I think we need to decrease our margin some because it's going too far out. So let's change this back to like 11. Nope, I lied to you. 16. Let's just leave it at 14. Because we'll have to play with it. Because again, it's all about like you have to have like identical fonts and weights and all that for it to be perfect. But that's about as perfect as it's going to get. So this is what we have here. So with just these few lines of code, we've adjusted the size of everything. We've went ahead and put some margin in between all of these. We changed the background color. And now it's actually looking like something real. So, yeah. Any questions so far? Comments, anything?
Not yet.
Okay.
Everything is pretty good right now.
Good. Have you really played with any of these yet? Like font weights and like, or actually margin. Have you really messed with margin and padding yet?
I haven't done anything with margin or padding, but I've done everything like font weight, text decoration, font size, background, that sort of stuff.
Gotcha.
But I've yet to start with margin and padding.
Beautiful. Okay. Yeah, margin and padding is very, very important. Because margin and padding is still used a lot. So there's like some things that you'll kind of learn that's outdated. Like when you learn like floats and stuff, they're kind of outdated. Nobody really uses floats anymore for modern websites just because they're a pain in the butt. But like margin and padding and stuff, you can see very, very important. That's how you kind of lay everything out. You know, it allows you to have like super fine tuning abilities. So yeah. Oh, beautiful. If there's anything that I'm doing that doesn't make any sense, definitely interrupt me and let me know. You know, I don't.
Got it.
So, alrighty. So what do we need to move on to now? I'm gonna leave kind of like the background color. It's super ugly and not even close to being right, but I'm gonna leave that for now. I'm gonna come back and probably edit that later. We'll probably have to do that like in a different video or something. But no problem. So let's go ahead and move down to this image. There's really nothing we need to do to it. The only thing I need to do to it, I believe, is I just need to add the width to it. So let me go ahead and I'm going to copy this because I like to. It's really good to get in the practice of like sectioning off your CSS. That way, you know, if you have to have because we're already on like 190 plus lines of code. You know, imagine if we have like a full website of like 600 lines of code. If you didn't have these comments in here, you wouldn't know where your header started and where like your main section began. So it's really good to do this, especially you know, for going back and looking at it later. So now we're going to go ahead here. We're going to say upper image. And the only thing I think I'm going to do to this, like I said, is just give it a width of 100%, just to make sure that it does go the whole way across. And I gave that a class of space image. So we'll go ahead and do space-image. And I want to go ahead in here and do a width of 100%. And that doesn't even change anything, but that's okay. That just makes sure that like if we get to like super big screens, like if I got like a 40-inch screen or something like that, and you know I wanted to go ahead and pull it, the image by default would only stretch to however wide it is. So if it's only like 1,000, like say 1,500 pixels wide, and then I put it on like a 4,000 width screen, it's only going to go up to 1,000 pixels. So it's going to be like super cut off and crazy, and I don't want that. I want it to be full width. Just to kind of give you like an example of what that would look like if I hard coded like 40% in here. It's just going to make it super tiny. But I don't want that. I want it to be the full width of the container. Bam, just like that. So that's really all we need to do with that. Let's take a look at the finished product and see if there's any margin or padding we need to do. There is not. However, you can see here, well, first and foremost, I put way too much either margin or padding on something, because you can see how mine is coming down way further than theirs, but it's not a big deal. But the one thing you can see is you see how like the images have like slightly rounded corners, whereas like ours is like perfectly like squared and ugly as hell. We'll go ahead here and we're going to do, it's called border-radius. And border radius, we're going to use pixels just because it's easier, but you can use percentages too. Like for example, if you wanted to get it perfectly oval, if you do 50%, it's just going to make it into a great big oval, for example. Whereas we don't want that. We can use like, we can do like percentages. If I want to do like 9%, for example, it'll give it like that weird little rounded effect thing there. But we don't want it to be so extreme. We only want it to be like maybe 10 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. That looks good. That looks about right. You can see how I just kind of rounded off the corners some. Now, if you wanted to play with border radius is very similar to like margin and padding, how I can take the 4 values. So I could, if I wanted to, do something weird like, 50 pixels and 0 and 100 pixels, for example, and I can jack this thing all up. So it's basically saying, there's 10 I believe it's, let me double check here. It is, I have to relook at it because I think it goes clockwise still, but I think it's something like, top right, bottom, or I'm sorry, top left, bottom left, or something like that. But you can kind of edit your images however you want to with that. I've never done it before, but I know you can do it. So like, you can do really crazy things like this, but I want it to be equal on all sides. So I'm just going to leave it at, was it 9%? No, it wasn't. It was a hell of less than that. Well, let's say it was 10 pixels or something. Yeah, 10. We'll just do 10 pixels and stuff. And then that just makes it so that it has the rounded edges. Because if we look here, especially at these, you'll see how like those are super ugly. Whereas like if we come in here and look at this, they have super rounded corners. They look a lot better. So we'll definitely do that as well. So I am not going to do any sort of margin or padding because in the finished product, it's bumping directly up to the header. The only thing that there is some separation here. Now you can do this one of two ways. You can either put margin bottom on the bottom of this image, or you can do margin top on this. So you can kind of do it any way you want. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. It's going to look exactly the same. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to put it on the main section, and I'm going to do margin top and bottom, because you can see how there's some, there's some spacing here and some spacing down here as well. So we're done with that. The upper image, that's really it. There's nothing to do. Next thing I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and grab this. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that there. And I'm going to say main section. Oop. Just like so. And now we're going to get into this here. So anything from liftoff all the way down here to this line here. Now for this line, it's going to be a little tricky. We can do this one of two ways, and it's up to you guys how you want to do it. I'm going to leave it up to you. But we can either do a border bottom on main, which is probably the easier way to do it, or we can do border top on this lower section here. What I'm thinking is we can do border bottom, And what we'll do is we'll be able to give it some padding to push it down. We'll do padding, or yeah, padding bottom to push it further down. That's what I'm thinking. But we can kind of do it either way. We can either do margin bottom on the main section to give it all that space, and then we can just do a border top of the lower section to give us this border here, and then just to kind of give us some padding top to push it down. Either way, there's nothing wrong with either method. It's just kind of how you want, but I'll leave that up to you guys when we get there. So main section. Let's see what we're doing with our main section. I need to go ahead and hop into here and see. Main section is, well, we're gonna hit the main tag first, because with the main tag, we have to do a display of flex. But because what we need to do is, because these are three, let me make sure this stupid thing's working. There has to be a better way to do this. Let's see, we have this is one thing. This is one section, this is another section, and this is another section. So what we want to do is, the main tag, we want to do display of flex, and then we want to do flex direction of column. So we're putting all three of these on top of each other. And that's just going to make things a lot easier for us. And then inside of this section here, we're also going to do display of flex, still flex direction column, but then when we get to the second one here, we're going to do display flex, but we're going to do regular display flexion row. And that's going to let them be side by side easily. So that's the first thing we're going to want to do, is we're going to come in here, come back to our CSS, and we're going to grab main. And first thing we want to do is we want to grab display of flex. Get rid of this. We don't need her anymore. Now watch what happens when I do display of flex. It is literally going to take everything. It's going to take this, this, and this, and it's going to throw it next to each other, side by side. Just like that. Because again, flex direction row is the default. It's going to take everything that's within main, and it's just going to put it side by side by side. We only want that to happen with the pictures, not with the content that's in there. So we're going to do flex direction of column. And that'll just throw them right back on top of each other. We also want to, I'm going to do, is it justify content? And I'm going to do that center. This is going to center align them. So when we do eventually add margin and padding, it's going to make sure that it's not favoring the top or bottom of the actual container, because sometimes it'll do that. It'll say, okay, you know, since by default it hugs the top, if we do margin and padding, sometimes it'll have like a weird little, like an extra 10 pixels or something like that. So it's not exactly center. So we're going to make sure we vertically align it with justify content center first. The next thing we can do, actually, if we want, is, let's see, I think, and actually, if you want to, we'll go ahead and give this a back, because this does look a little confusing. We'll give it a, do I want to give it, no, let's give it a border. Because when you have image, one thing you'll find was when you have images, you cannot, if you do background color does not apply to images. So if I say like background color green, for example, it'll like, just imagine, you know, for whatever reason, there's this weird space. But like if all of these were side by side by side, you wouldn't be able to see the background color behind it. So images, you can't really put a background color on. So let's do a border. If you've never done a border before, it takes in 3 values. The first is how thick the border is. We'll do 1 pixel thickness. The next is going to be what type of border it is. So there's like solid, dashed, all kinds of ones that you can do. So we're going to do a solid border of 1 pixel, and then the last value is the color of the border. So in this case, we'll do a red border. And this is what we get. We get a red border that goes all the way around this thing. Now, like I said, you know, we can always change this to like 4 pixels to make it thicker. And there's even values for like dashed, for example, and then that just gives it like a dashed, you know, look to it. So we're not going to leave it there. We're only doing it just so we get a visual representation of what like padding and stuff is doing. So I'm going to give it solid. I'm also going to go ahead and change this back to, we'll say 2 pixels. Just because, why not? Okay. Whew. So now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and let's double check and see what this thing looks like. Okay. Now the first thing that I'm realizing here is, do you see how, let's see, where is it? Here it is. How this is perfectly lined up with that image. It's very slight and very minor, but if we actually look at the real thing, it's actually indented slightly, right? So it's like there's like a little bit of indentation. So that would be a case of how this entire main has a little bit of padding. So basically what's happening is it's adding a little bit of padding on the left-hand side. It's pushing it to the right, so it's left padding. So we're going to add just a teeny tiny bit of padding. You're also going to notice too that there's that it's also like not completely butted up against it. So there might even be some top padding as well. I'll actually probably just call that margin instead, actually, just to make things a little bit easier. Yeah, we're going to definitely give it some margin first. But before we do anything like margin and padding and stuff, I want to give it its font sizes, because font size plays a huge part when it comes to margin and padding and stuff. So let's get rid of that marker. There we go. So yeah, let's go ahead here first. I'm going to put a little bit of margin and padding just to kind of bump it up away from that, but nothing too crazy. So for the main, we're just going to say margin, top and bottom. I'm going to say 10 pixels on the top and bottom, nothing left and right, right? Because if I left it 10 pixels, it's going to do margin everywhere. It's going to basically say margin, margin, margin everywhere. And I kind of don't want it to be margin everywhere. I only want it to be margin top and bottom, because even though it kind of gives us that little bit of indentation, I don't think that's exactly what we want. I think I want to do that with padding, but let me double check, because I may have misspoke. We can do that with margin. It's not really that big of a deal. I mean, in this case, it kind of can go kind of either way. We can do margin. It's no problem. I think that looks that looks about okay. Let's try and see what happens, but I think it's probably going to come down to padding. Yeah, screw it. We'll leave it like that for a minute. And then what I want to do here is we're going to go ahead inside of here, and we're going to grab each thing and give it its font size. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead in here, and I want to grab these two I believe they're H2s, and give them their font size. Yeah, let's start there. So what I want to do is I want to go in here, and there is a section. So first and foremost, we want to go ahead here, and it's main section. So there's two main sections and the image section. So let's go ahead here first. We'll actually get rid of you. So let's do main section. And we want to do the H2s. And we want to give them a font size of 20 pixels, for example. And then basically just grab both of those. Oh, actually, one of the very first things we can do as well is text transform, and they're capitalized, I believe. There you go. So now they're capitalized instead of all lowercase. And it's probably going to be font weight and everything as well, right? Let's see. Oh, big time. Yeah, those are big time bolded. Font weight is, we'll just say bold. And now they're bolded, and I believe actually they're still bigger. Bolded, bolded. Oh yeah, they're way bigger. Okay, no problem. 20 pixels, let's say 30 pixels. And we'll kind of leave that just like that. Alrighty, let's see what we got here. Let me go ahead, actually. And I'm going to get rid of this border here real fast just because we don't really need it right now. So we got that. The next thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead here and I want to grab the paragraph as well and give the paragraph its font size as well, just so we can more easily do this. So font size, and we'll say 20 pixels, for example. Wow, that looks a lot better. Holy crap. Okay. All right. The other thing that I kind of want to add as well is some line height, because you can kind of see these two things are like pushed together a bit. So we'll say line height 1.3 maybe? 1.2. 0.1. We'll leave it at 1.1. Okay, so that looks good. The next thing that I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead. So I'm going to kind of push those down a little bit, because the next thing that I want to do main section, I want to go ahead and I want to say what is the next thing we got to do? Because I want to push these, they're way too close together. So I'm trying to think of the best way to kind of deal with this. I'm thinking about just putting a margin bottom on the H2s here. So come here and do like, for example, margin bottom of like 9 pixels, for example. And that'll put some distance in between those, I believe. All right, let's take a look here. Ours doesn't look. Ours looks a little bit different, but that's a-okay. Let's see here. Actually, let's do this as well. Let's go ahead and do main section, and I want to do a margin. There we go. Margin top and bottom of, we'll say 10 pixels, 0 left and right. Right. Main section. Bottom. That didn't really look much different at all. There we go. That looks a little bit better. So now it's spread out. So like this section here is away from this section, is away from this section. So it looks a little bit better. Actually, I think that font size might be a little bit too big for the paragraph because it looks really similar to the headings. So let's change that to like 16 pixels one time. Alex, oh, it looks, I guess, a little bit better. Let's do font size of like 35 one time. Because those are they're supposed to be headings. They're supposed to be significantly different. But Alex, I guess a little bit better. Okay. And then the next thing that I want to do is I want to deal with the main section. I want this to be display of flex. And I also want this to be flex direction, because again, if I do display flex on something, it's just going to throw everything side by side. So here's our heading, and it's right beside our paragraph. We don't want that. So we want flex direction of column. And that'll just throw them right back down there again. But what this right here will let us do is this will just make sure that it's vertically, I want it to be vertically aligned and everything, just in case anything goes crazy. So the next thing that I want to kind of move on to is I want to move on to these pictures. These pictures right here are the most important thing right now, because they're just going to be so significantly different. So it's called image section here. So I'm going to do a class. I'm going to grab the image section class. So img section. In this, we're going to do display flex, and it's not going to do a whole lot because they're already side by side. But you did see that it got rid of that space there, which is exactly what we want. We don't want any crazy space because that's going to mess with things for us. We want to go ahead and make sure that the width Actually, let me do this. Let me make a border, 1 pixel, solid red, and let me show you what I'm doing here. So you see here how all of the images are stacked on top of each other, but there's still space, right? They're just stacked on top of each other, but there's still all this space. I want these images to be spread out. You know, I want them to take up the full width of this thing, just like this right here shows. There's some space in between them and stuff like that, and they're taking up the full width of this thing. So from here all the way over to there is taking up all the space, whereas ours isn't for some reason. So this is the beauty of Flexbox, and this is where things really get really cool. Image section. I've already done display flex on it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do justify content space between. So this is basically going to automatically calculate how wide the container is, and it's going to automatically calculate out the margins and everything like that to get it to go all the way across. Just like that. So where we might normally have to like play with the margins and have to do like some calculations and account for like 1% margin left and right and take that away. So now all of a sudden we have to get it to act perfectly like that, our margin might be 3.3223% or something nuts. And we have to calculate that. Now we don't. Now we just have to simply say, hey, you know, the width is automatically 100%. Space between automatically calculates everything for us, which is super awesome. At this point, for the images, let's actually double check here and see. I think theirs are either they're a little more spread out than ours. Maybe not actually. That might be just about perfect. The only difference from ours might be the border radius. So we're going to change that right now. So we're going to go ahead here and we're going to say border dash radius. And we're going to say 20 pixels. Ooh, let's see what that looks like. Oh, wait a minute. I'm an idiot. Scratch that. I'm actually calling, and that's actually a really good thing to show. I'm actually calling by accident border radius on the container itself. So what it's doing here is it's grabbing the border here and it's actually twisting the border. I don't want to twist the border. I want to twist the image themselves. So this is a good representation. Like for example, if I do something like 50% to make it perfectly round, all of a sudden now you're seeing like the border is acting, the container itself is acting weird, whereas it doesn't affect the images at all. So that's a good representation of like, you need to know what you're calling these attributes on, or else weird things might happen. So we're gonna go ahead here, we're gonna go down, we're gonna say image dash section, and inside of that, we wanna grab each image, right? So if we look back here, image section is the container, and inside image section are 3 images. So we want to adjust the border radius on the images. So we're going to call image section, image, and this is where we're going to say border radius, 20 pixels. And now we're getting where we're adjusting all the thingies on them, and that actually looks damn near close. Let's see. I think theirs might be, that's about right. I think ours might be are a little bit too big, but that's okay. I'm not trying to make this like verbatim exactly. We're just trying to just kind of lay it out and everything from scratch. So that looks really good. All right. We are damn near close to being done with our main section. At this point, the only thing that we're really missing is, let me grab, yeah, see our like padding and all that's a little off, but that's okay. I'm not necessarily worried about that terribly. But the only thing left that we're missing here is we are missing this underline here. Let me go ahead here and see. Anything else before? Sorry, I'm replying to a text message. some people in the group message me who are doing the Intro to Lambda course, and some of them are asking me, like, I'm helping them out with like Java, their JavaScript and everything. So, sorry about that. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so this underline here that we want. So what I'm thinking about doing is I'm thinking about putting it on the main section and then giving it some padding bottom to push it down, right? Or what we can do is we can put it on the lower section here and then just do margin top to push it away from that, and then do some padding top to push it away from that. Which do you guys prefer to do? Do you want to put it on the main section, or do you want to put it on the lower section?
You can put it on the main section.
Main section? Okay. All right, all right. Let's do it. Main section, and we're going to do it right here on the main section. So, let me go ahead here real fast. So this here is the border. This is an entire border, right? Normally the borders reach all the way around. We don't want a full border. We only want the bottom of the border. So we can actually put in here border dash bottom, and that'll only give us the bottom border, right? Which is super, super cool. And the neat thing is, like, if you want to do it this way, you could technically mix and match as well. So we could do like border right, and we could do something crazy. So, the border bottom is just, the typical stuff, and all of a sudden you got this super ugly, ridiculous, really thick dashed border on the right-hand side. And then you could do border left, border top. You have full control over your borders. In this case, we only want a border bottom. Now, there's some websites that you'll actually find where, we got this right here, there is a, yeah, there we go. There might be, like, for example, a border here and a border here. In which case, what you can do is just do border top, border bottom, and just make a match. And for example, and sometimes some websites will do that. They'll like section off their website using some sort of like horizontal rule, for example. And you can do this in HTML. I think it's called like HR or something like that, for horizontal rule or something along those lines. But like I was kind of telling you the last time, Mark, is like, don't really worry about those because it's kind of frowned upon to write that stuff in HTML. You really should do it like this in CSS, where you put the border top or border bottom or whatever on one of the containers and then use margin and padding to actually make the division. So this is kind of an example of that. So you could technically do it in HTML, but there's really no way to style it. So like if you did a horizontal rule, it's kind of hard set here. And there's nothing that we can really do about it because you can't add margin or padding to it because it's its own element, basically, which can be irritating. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to change this to black real fast. And then what we're going to do, I think, again, let's see how quickly I can embarrass myself on a recorded video. Let's do padding bottom. And let's see if we can do it this way. Do padding bottom 24 pixels. There we go, just like that. So that's going to give us that effect of it's on the main element, but because we're doing margin bottom, let's actually see, can I give this a background color of pink? I like pink. Pink. So basically, what we're doing here is we're adding padding, and what padding is, like I said, is it's spaced within the container itself, for example. So like, for example, if I do padding, but if I do something crazy like 100 pixels, for example, that's going to give me like a huge amount of space between, kind of pushing down some. So that's definitely something really important to kind of think about. So let's go ahead here and let's change this to like maybe 30 pixels possibly. So we'll see like kind of about where they had it. Again, this isn't going to be perfect, and I'm not worried about that. Okay, so you can see ours is way up here. we want it to be way down here. So we're going to go ahead here. We're just going to increase that padding. Let's try 50. All right, and let's see what happened. Not quite there, but getting really, really close. Let's go ahead and do like 57. Not yet. Let's do 61. Not quite. It's 65. Perfect. Look at that. That overlaps just a little bit more. Now, the reason why I was saying like earlier, so I did this indentation using margin. The reason why I said that margin wasn't right is if you look at the end result, the reason why it's padding is because if it was margin, then this should line up with come on now, there we go. That should line up perfectly, but because this here is further out, that means that there is no margin on the actual main itself. So the margin 10 that we did here, that's not right. That would actually be padding because it would allow this to be its full width, the bar itself to be full width, but then it would push all of the information in slightly. So like if you look at ours, our information is lined up with the bar. So the bar is just slightly too short. So this would actually be padding. Am I right or am I wrong? I might be wrong. Am I wrong? I am not wrong. That is actually perfect. Damn near it, at least. So that's just an example of like margin versus padding. Is margin will actually, it takes the entire container and pushes it away from the body, whereas padding just takes and it just gives it just puts some padding. It puts some space only from the content itself. So in this case right here, like our border, at least our border is slightly longer. So that's why it's padding instead of yeah. And like as well as if you saw it was, let me do this right here. Let's do margin 10 pixels so you can actually kind of see the difference. So if I got rid of the padding, check this out. So if I got rid of the padding, but it was margin, do you see how, like, for example, the pictures are lined up perfectly to the container there, whereas if it's padding, it's actually giving me some space between. So it's basically just taking everything within the container and smushing that towards the middle, as opposed to actually taking the container itself and smushing the entire container. So margin and padding is a very difficult concept to grasp. I know it took me a long time to fully understand it. But it's definitely, that's a good example, at least. So let me go ahead here. Let me get rid of this stupid thing. There we go. All right. And actually, if we wanted to, we can actually give it even more left and right padding. If I said, what did I say originally? 10 pixels? Oops. Yeah, 10 pixels. If I do like 15 pixels, for example, it'll then push it in even more, basically. And at least there's a distinction. So the bar here it's longer out than the actual content is. So it's just kind of a representation of that. We'll get rid of the background color here. And there we are. That looks gorgeous. Now, unfortunately, this stuff down here looks terrible. So that's where we're going to head to next, I think. So yeah, any questions with that, with the main section? And that was the biggest section with the most craziness.
No, so far so good.
Good, beautiful. Okay. All right. And then the last bit here, or one of the last bits other than the container, is going to be this. I think I called it the lower section. I want to say. Main section, lower section. Yep, that's what I call it. Okay, yep, so let me do this right here, because I have to use the bathroom. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a real short break. I'll be right back. If you need to go do anything, go ahead and do something. But we'll go ahead and we'll finish this up in a bit, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, right back. You turd. All right. Is it just you and I in here, Mark? All right, are you back, Mark? You still going?
I'm right here.
All right, cool. What in the world are we doing now? Let's see. This super ugly section down here. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's get this done. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the properties or the font sizes and everything from the paragraph in the H2 are actually exactly the same as the one down here. Let me double check. If so, that's, yeah, it looks like it. Looks like it's about the same. So that makes things a little bit easier for us. Okay. So the first thing that I'm realizing with this down here is you can see this is severely indented, right? This, if I follow the this right here, it should be like this right here, but it's not. There is a bunch of, and the same thing with this here as well. there's a bunch of either margin or padding on the left and the right to kind of push this in. I don't know if it's margin or if it's padding. I'm not too sure yet. We'll have to play with it and see. But we'll find out. So let's go ahead here first, and let me get rid of these loops. There we go. Come way down here. Okay, main section. This is going to be the lower section. Okay, lower section. And I believe I gave it just a class of lower section, right? Yep. So lower section. Okay. Now, the things inside of this, again, is going to have a display of flex, right? Because these things are side by side. So we have literally two things. So you could literally think that this whole thing here, the turd, there we go. So you literally think that this whole thing here is lower section. What just happened? Oh God, you still there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Dude, I about had a heart attack. I thought my VS Code crashed. Oh my God. All of a sudden it just disappeared. I was like, oh my God, is my computer crashing? Holy crap. Okay, now we're good. Okay. Crap. So, yeah, so we could literally think of this this is lower section here, this whole thing. And inside lower section is broken up into two parts. We have this huge part of here on the left and the image on the right. So what we want to do is we want to call display flex on lower section so we can take those two things and we can throw them side by side, right? So let's do display flex. Go ahead and get rid of this. And let's take a look at ours. Yep, so that's exactly what happens. You can see here that now all of this here is on one side and the image is on the right side. Fortunately, that is not even close to what we want, so we're going to have to play with that some. The next thing that I want to do here is I want to go ahead and I want to say justify content space between. I want to see if this actually works because I actually had some trouble with this on my project originally and it's not working. I don't know why this doesn't work. I need to actually inquire on that because it's confusing. But basically the poor image is super tiny and it's being pushed way to the side. So there's a few things that we can do to fix that. Let me actually see. How did I have this set up? Article. Yeah, okay. So I had article. So what I want here is let's go ahead and let's do lower section. And I want to give each article a fixed width of about, we'll say each one of them gets like 45%, for example. Oh, no, I'm an idiot. What am I doing? Article. I'm making, there we go. There we go, that looks a lot better. So, so basically what I did there is originally, because the sentences go all the way across the screen, it's basically pushing the image way, way, way to the right. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, each part, each two sections, you're only 45% total. And what that does is that stops the text from going way all the way over there. Which isn't a bad thing. It's definitely not it's not kind of what we want though, because what we can see here is we see that if I give this a border of 1 pixel solid red, what's happening is for whatever reason there's some space to the right of this image. I don't know what that space is yet. Oh, not page source. Let's see if our tools will tell us what that space is, because it might just be like residual like padding or whatever from images. So let's see what we got. U. No, saying there's no padding on it. No, no padding. I don't know why it does that. That is really strange. Oh, you know why? I know exactly why. I'm goofy. Okay. Oh. I want to try it before I actually shoot my mouth off because I might be wrong. IMG width. Aha! And that's exactly why. Is because for whatever reason the image, I think it's the size of the image it normally is. It didn't take up 100% of the actual article. So if I go ahead here and I say, let's do lower section article, let's do a background of green, for example. Take a look here. You can see that this is the first section here. There's a bunch of space right here. That's all white space. And then this is the second article. And because we can see the background color, we can see that the image is not taking up the entire width of its parent. Or whatever you want to call it, like a container. So all I did was I just said, hey, image, take up 100%. And then it just pulls it the rest of the way. Just like that. However, let's see. I want to do, can I do height auto? Maybe, will that help at all? Nope, that doesn't do anything. Okay, that's okay. No problem. All right. Now what we need to do is we just need to go ahead and style this text and everything in here. And I believe, like I said, I believe lower section dot lower section article H2 is the same font size as this H2 up here. So let's actually grab this, put the same exact stuff in here, and see what happens. So let's go for a walk. I gave it that same font size and everything. Looks good. I like it. I like it, like it, like it. Okay. And then for the P tag, I want to grab that same information for P tag. Section P right here. Font size, all that good stuff. Just like so. And that basically gives me what I want. Now, what we did find here is that that everything is kind of smushed in a bit more. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to put some severe padding on the left and right to push the lower section from the wrapper. And that's going to give us this. This here is slight, but we're going to want one that's severely exaggerated. Ours for down here is way, way exaggerated, like you see here. It's way in there. So we want that lower section to have a padding. And we want the padding primarily on the left and right. So let's do something like 50 pixels left and right and see what happens. That is a lot of padding. Let's see. That is looking a heck of a lot better. Let's actually get rid of that border. There we go. So yeah, that looks a lot better now that it's kind of pushed inward. Let's see about how it looks in comparison. Theirs is a little bit more. You can see how ours is like just, it's over here. Theirs is a little bit further in. So let's go ahead and toss some more in there. Where is, let's do 60. And it's freaking close. Really, really close. I like it. Like it, like it, like it. Okay. And in the lower section as well, from what we can see is ours is pushed way up to the top here, whereas theirs has a lot of, it's either margin or padding. I would venture to say it's probably margin. at the top there. So what we can do is we can just put a bunch of margin top, and that'll just pull our stuff down. So lower section, say margin. Top and bottom, let's say 40 pixels and 0 left and right. That looks a little bit better, but I think that's not even close to enough yet. Try her again. Actually, no, actually, I think I might have put too much. No, maybe not quite. That's okay. That is good. That's actually really, really good. Next thing that I need to do is, for the image, we're going to round out the image's sides a bit. So let's do something like this. Oh, border, not border, you idiot. Border radius. There we go. And that'll smooth out our edges a bit. Theirs, I think they did a lot more though. I think theirs is a little more than ours. Let's do border radius of like 16 pixels one time. That looks good. Okay. Nifty. Nifty, nifty, nifty. Let's see here. I think I might have. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I made a bit of a mistake. I put way too much text in those paragraphs, for one, and I also need to add some spacing in between these paragraphs. So let me go in here, and let me actually do some removal of all of this here. Something like this, and we'll remove up to this. There we go. That looks a lot better. All right, and the next thing that we want to do, let's head back in here. All right, and then for the paragraphs, we want to do a little bit of margin to kind of push them away from each other. So we want to do top and bottom, but no left and right. So that's what this right here does. It just gives us, instead of it being something like this, where it's just kind of smushed up together, you can't tell where one paragraph starts and where one ends. Now each paragraph has a little bit of padding, so it kind of differentiates it a bit, which is really, really nice. And then it looks like pretty much the last thing we need to do actually is just style that button. And then we'll have to do the footer real fast. That's about it. Let's go ahead here and let's do lower section. Actually, we could do it with something like this. For buttons, you'll see a lot of times they'll have a class and they'll normally call it like button or BTN or something like that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to call it BTN. So we can go in here to our CSS, and I can literally say .btn, and let's figure out how we're going to do this. So let's first get rid of the text decoration. There, the underline. Remember text decoration. Oops, decoration. None. Color. What color was that thing? I don't even remember. Color is white. And the background color is like a, they don't have charcoal, do they? Let's use chocolate. What does chocolate look like? Okay. Let's give that a go. So we can have like a charcoal color or something. All right, the next thing we need to do is we need to adjust the font size a bit. So let's actually make the font size the same font size as the paragraph tag, just for consistency. Maybe. Let's see. Scroll down a little bit. No, actually, let's make it about the same size as this, 35. Oop, pixel. There we go. That looks a lot better. Okay, cool. So then what we can do is we can go ahead and we need to, because it's so smushed up against the edges, we'll go ahead and we'll throw some of that. Do you remember, is that margin or padding? Where you adjust the space within an element. Right, that's going to actually be padding. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is, I don't know how much padding we should use. Let's do 10 pixels all around, just to see what happens. Neato. Okay. Neat. Okay. So let's go ahead here and let's also get it away from the paragraph sum. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to, actually, let's do less on the top and bottom. I think it's too tall right now. So let's do like 4 pixels on the top and bottom. There we go. Let's also do text transform, capitalized to make it capitalized. Transform, capitalized. Just like so. And that looks good. The next thing I want to do is I want to do some border dash radius of about maybe 15 pixels or so to just kind of, not that much, 10 pixels, to kind of do that a little bit. And then the next thing I want to do is I just want to do some margin top to push it away from the paragraphs there. So let's do margin. Let's do margin top of 15 pixels. That didn't do anything. Why didn't that do anything? 100 pixels. My WTN. Okay. Border 1 pixel solid black. That is not working for some reason. Why can I not, let's see, lower section, height, 5, oh. Well, that kind of stinky poo-poos a bit. Let's see, for some reason we can't do any margin bottom or margin top. Let's see. Border 1 pixel solid red. Let's see, that or oh, there it is. What the world was that all about? Height. Why are you being stupid? Margin top. 10 pixels. For For some reason, my button doesn't want to... Oh, I'm an idiot. Display inline block. Is that why? Ah, okay. Well, that's really stupid of me. Okay. Dear Lord. Okay. So I'll get rid of you as well. Okay, something to keep in mind. With the box model, you will learn a little bit about like inline elements versus block level elements. One thing to remember is that block level element or inline elements, you cannot add any margin or padding to the top and bottom, only the left and right. It's just a weird quirk with CSS, and it's definitely something you'll run into. What I was trying to do originally was I was trying to get the button to, kind of put some margin top on it to push it further down, but I kept adding margin and it just wouldn't take the margin for some reason. I forgot A tags are considered inline elements. They don't, by like kind of the nature of them, they can't take any sort of margin or padding top and bottom. So what I had to do was I had to change its display to inline block, which is what I did here. An inline block is a type of inline element that is also like a block. It's really weird and I don't understand it. But if you change it to inline block, I can now add margin and padding to the top and bottom, just like so. So you will run into a lot of really goofy, weird things. And that is one of them. All right, and the very next thing that I want to do is, one of the very last things is we're going to go ahead and just do the footer real fast, because that's super easy. And we'll go down here, and we'll just say footer. And in the footer, we'll just say text align center to put that copyright in the center there. And what did I use for that? H2. Footer H2, we'll say font size, and we'll give it the same font size as the H2. Oops. Just like so. Which I think is way too damn big, so let's not do that. Let's do 12 pixels. 14 pixels. Good enough. Your copyrights, you don't want them to be too big. And then we'll just leave that like that because it's not that big of a deal. However, what we want to do here is we want to do the most important thing is a background color of light gray, like so. We also wanted to have a padding, a huge padding, because I remember the original one here, like this one, has a lot of padding, actually. And actually, that does actually look like 34 pixels. It's just the font is a little bit different. Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to give it a bunch of padding to make it mimic this one here. Basically. Actually, yeah, our font size is way too damn big. Let's take that back to like 14 pixels or something. That looks actually a lot better. 18. Final offer. Okay. Now we're going to be padding all around. Well, padding all around of, we'll say what? We'll say 30 pixels. All that padding. Let's see what we got here. That looks pretty good. The very last thing I want to do is we're going to go ahead here and we will do a border radius. Or not. I'm an idiot. What the hell am I doing? You don't want the darn padding on the H2, you want it. Oh god. 34 pixels, you want it on the actual footer itself. And then we want border radius of, say, 15 pixels. And that will just kind of do that. And then one of the last things that I want to do is actually want to do a hover effect on this button. So when you hover over it, a common thing that you do when you hover over it is it switches the color with the background color to give it a bit of a hover effect. So I'm going to show you real quick how to do a hover effect. It's pretty easy. You just call whatever you want to. You just type in whatever selector that you want to call the hover effect on. So in this case, we're going to do it on the button. And you call a pseudo selector. And a pseudo selector always starts with a colon. So you do colon, and then whatever pseudo selector you want to use. In this case, we're going to do hover. So basically, what we're going to do for hover is we're going to change the background color to white, and we're going to change the color to chocolate, because we're literally just inverting the button. So now if we hover over it, it will literally just change the background to white and the color to chocolate, just like that. And so now we have a nifty little hover effect going on. And that's kind of be it, man. There's a lot more that we can do with this. I'll probably come back at some point, maybe like add some hover effects to this or something, and everything. I definitely want to revisit this and maybe do some JavaScript as well. I'm not necessarily sure what yet, but yeah. So that is kind of that. Do you have any questions or concerns or anything that you're having trouble with?
One part I don't know if I missed it was, how did you make the button in the HTML?
So,
I think I missed, I don't remember how you did that exactly.
Yeah, no problem. Let me actually turn this down a little bit. The button is just an A tag. So the button is just a regular A tag, not going anywhere. I just gave it a class of BTN just so I could grab it in CSS, and that's it. A lot of professionals will choose to do A tags over actual buttons, because I mean you can do a real button and stuff. But the problem with buttons is they're harder to. They're not really harder to do, but they're a bit more of a pain in the butt to style, because they come with their own preset like margins and paddings inside of it and things like that. They're just, I don't know, they're just not as easy to work with as an A tag. And the A tag does the exact same thing. You know, you have a reference there, you can change it, you can redirect it to whatever website you want or anything. It's pretty interesting. So, yeah. So one thing that we can do as well, like actually we can do it real quick, is we can make these navigation actually work. So for example, if I do home, if I click on the home button, which won't really do anything for you right now, one thing we can do is we can give the header an ID of home, and then we can set the href here to hashtag home. So that when we click on the home button here, the navigation button, what it does is it will pull us back up. I believe it'll pull us back up to the header. Whereas if we say about us, let's say about, and let's put the about us here on. Let me put the about here on the. It doesn't really make much darn sense, but I'll put it down here on the lower, just so you can see. So the lower section here, I'm going to give it an ID of about. So what's going to happen? What should happen? Let me actually test it and double check here. So we'll say about us, click it, and it brings us all the way down here to that. So these buttons, they can just redirect to different places on your page. A lot of static websites will do this, where it's just one page is the entire website, and to get to different locations in the website, they just link their navigation to that. So what I can do here is I can literally say, if this down here if this said like about us or like services or something like that, then what you could do is you could just click on about us, and it will just pull you down to the about section of your website, and so on and so forth. If I wanted to say contact, like a lot of times I'll have like their email addresses and all that at the bottom to contact them. You can just go here to contact and link that to hashtag contact. Come all the way down here to footer. Give footer an ID of contact. Because in CSS, I showed you here that when you want to call a class, you always put the period before whatever the class name is, right? Well, for IDs start with a hash. So what this is literally saying is we want this to go to hash contact. And what happens is we say ID equals contact. That's literally like saying, okay, when you click the button, take us to hash contact. When it clicks it, this is literally going to say hash contact. So you're just linking different elements of the page to the IDs of the page. So now if I go up here to the top and I click on contact, it'll take me all the way down here to this. And then if I click on about us, it'll take me to wherever I put ID equals about. And we can.
The only thing you do. Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. And then like you can actually you can use JavaScript to actually make it more of a smooth transition to where it scrolls down to it. But that's JavaScript there. But yeah. So
no, but I'm saying the only thing you do. So in HTML is where you put in the ID tag, and then you put like about us or contact. But then on CSS, the only thing you just put the hashtag and put ID.
Well, like for example, if I wanted to style, let's do this right here. Instead of putting home there, let's do it this way. Let's do body. Let's do ID equals home, for example. So if we give something, so until you get into JavaScript, I would kind of stay away from IDs because the difference between IDs and classes is a bit of a lengthy conversation. I really couldn't explain that very well. But like say for example you had an ID and you wanted to style it in CSS, what you would do is instead of doing a period, like getting a class, IDs are done with a hashtag. So if I say hash, what I call it, home. So if I say hash home, I can actually style that. It's on the body tag. So I can literally say, give it a background color of green. And it gives the body a green background color, for example.
I see.
The thing is, like, kind of be careful because the main difference between the main difference between classes and IDs is mostly what they call like specificity, which is more powerful. IDs are the most powerful. So what that means is if I actually say, if I go in here, let me go all the way to the bottom, actually, probably be easier to see it. If I come all the way down here and I say body, background color of red, and then I have, let me actually just give this a ID of body, just so you see the same thing. And if I come in here and I say ID body, and I say background of blue, it's always going to be blue. Because even though I'm getting the same exact element, IDs are more, they're more specific. They always take priority. Even if I move it up here, it's still going to be blue. It'll never be red because, because I'm using the CSS selector. So like kind of in the specificity chain or the power chain, a regular selector like body is lowest, so it's not as powerful. And then it goes to classes, and then IDs are the most specific. The only thing more powerful than a I think the only thing more powerful than an ID, I think, is the select all selector, which is a asterisk. This here literally means everything. But yeah, I would kind of stay away from IDs because they can sometimes get you into trouble. Because like if you like set the background color, for example, with an ID at the top, but then you decide you want to change it later, you can't do that. You have to go all the way back to the top where you originally called the ID and change it there because the ID will always take precedence. It's kind of annoying when you use them. I think you use them a lot in JavaScript, and I think you use them a bit. You'll use them a lot as well, like in this circumstance. So if you wanted to make your navigation point to somewhere on the page, you'll use them. But other than that, though, you really won't use CSS with them that much. It's kind of a bad idea because it'll sometimes like I remember I spent like 2 days one time trying to figure out why I couldn't add margin to something, and it was because I had margin hard coded using an ID somewhere like in the middle somewhere, and I had to search through like 400 lines of code to find it. It was so annoying. So yeah, IDs can be a pain in the butt.
Okay.
Let me actually get rid of this. It looks really ugly. But I would definitely take a look at some of the links, especially the box model where it talks about like margin, padding, border, that kind of stuff. That's very, very important. And at least for me, I had a hard time learning that for some reason. I had a hard time learning when to use margin and when to use padding. So that definitely helps. And the other link for the Flexbox is really cool too. It's quite useful. So
yeah, because I was actually 2 days ago I was trying to figure out how to have things like in the navigation where they side to side, but I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, it can be a pain in the butt.
So now I see I can do it with a Flexbox.
Oh yeah, big time. Because otherwise, what do you do with that? I think you have to change them to like inline blocks. Like the A tags, you have to change them to inline blocks. And then you have to float them left so that they line up properly. But you also have to make sure that the font size is small enough or they'll bleed onto the next line. It's a giant pain in the butt. But like for example, let's do this instead. This will probably be a lot easier. Let's go to CodePen. So like with like Flexbox, for example, say you have a navigation, and inside the navigation you have you have 4 A tags, for example. We'll say like home, about, contact, and services or something. I don't know. So yeah, it's kind of, now that you kind of like know a little bit about Flexbox does make things a heck of a lot easier. Because like, say for example, you want to get them to align in the center, right? Can I do a text align center? I don't even know. Center. Does that work? Yeah, that does work. So that'll kind of like put it in the center. But like, say for example, you had it so that say you also have an H2 here, and it was called like brand, something like that. So it said brand, and you wanted them to be side by side, right? So say for example, you wanted let me see if I can find this darn thing. Go back over here. So say for example, you wanted the brand to be here. It doesn't freaking want to work, but you want brand to be here, and you want your navigations to be here, right? There's no easy way to do that, without Flexbox, without having to like, how do you even do that? I think it's like you have to grab your H2, and you have to do things like I don't know, but like there's like a billion different things that you'd have to do to make that work. Whereas you wouldn't even want the brand in there. Technically, you want the brand to be outside. So like, let's just make a container to contain this stuff just to make it easier. So yeah, just say like, for example, you have your H2 here, and it just said brand, for example. So the problem that I'm having here is that, like, because the H2 is a block level element, it literally means that, like, if I do like a background of like red, for example, it literally means that it goes all the way across. So the first thing that I have to do with this, for example, is turn this into like an inline block, for example. And it's just a giant pain in the butt, you know. So if I do like inline block, then it doesn't make it so that it goes all the way across, but then you have to like float this. The navigation, I think, is you also have to make that inline block as well, and it's just a big, giant pain in the ass. Whereas if you wanted to do, float them side by side, and you wanted to do it with Flexbox, you literally just say display flex. I think, does the H, yeah, actually, hang on, there's a way. How do you do this? Because I don't even know how to, HTML, CSS. I don't use, there we go. I think that's it right there. There you go, yeah. So with like a reset and all that, now they're side by side. Right? You don't even have to do anything. I literally did it with just one thing, display flex, and it throws them side by side. And now if I want to throw them to opposite corners of the page, now all I have to do is you justify content, and you just do space between. Right, and it just throws them to opposite sides of the page. Now what you can do is you can just go in and grab your nav A tags, and you can just give them their spaces and sizes. You know, now you can just say like font size, you know, what, 20 pixels each, to make them a bit bigger, and then now you can just say like margin and 0 on the top and bottom and 15 pixels on the left and right, for example, and that'll spread them out. You know, so Flexbox just makes things way easier. It's insane how easy it is. You know, so yep. Or like, and also too, like say for example, you want say you're making a mobile website, right? So you don't want them to be side by side. You want the brand to be on top of the navigation. Well, that's not a problem because now you can just go in here and just say flex direction. And you can just say column. Oop, that's not how you spell column. There. And what you can do too is you can go ahead here and say align items center. And that'll literally just stack them all on top of each other and put them in the center. You know, so it's way easier. I would definitely highly recommend taking some time and learning Flexbox because it can be a little weird, you know. For example, you know, in the HTML you wrote it like this, so brand is on top of nav, right? So your brand here is always going to be above nav. But say you wanted to flip flop that, but you didn't want to go and do it in HTML. Well, with Flexbox, you can go and grab that H2 and you can order it to be below the nav. So you could say something along the lines of like H2 order, and as long as it's a positive, as long as it's higher than 0, it'll automatically let everything go above it. So now if I do order 1, the navigation goes above brand, and you didn't even have to change your HTML, for example, you know. So, yeah. One really good, what is it called? Oh my God, we had it. Let me see if I can find it. It is called Flexbox Game. Now, there is a game that teaches that basically teaches you Flexbox. Flex Froggy, here it is. This thing is awesome. So the object of the game, you write the code. I'll give this link to you. This thing is super cool. So basically, it tells you here. It tells you what everything does. So justify content is what aligns if everything is set in a row. So by default, as long as it's not flex direction column, justify content aligns things on the horizontal axis, right? So the object of the game here is to write the justify content that puts the frog on the lily pad, right? So you literally type in here, justify content. And based on the options there, flex start, flex end, center, space between, space around, which would you use to move that frog from the left to the right?
Flex end.
Exactly. You literally do that. And throws the frog on the lily pad. And then as you go and you get a bit more like in depth, then all of a sudden it gives you 2 frogs. And then it says, okay, so you're still using justify content, and the justify content, you're still on the horizontal axis. So now you want them to both be in the center. So you would just do justify content center as an example. And it's going to gradually get much, much harder. Like some of these. Here's another one as well, where you're going to be using justify content. Let's see, by using justify content this time, the lily has a lot of space between them. So you're going to justify content, and there is 2 options here. There's space between and space around. Now, I don't exactly remember the difference. You kind of got to play with it and see what the difference is yourself. I'm going to say space between and see what happens. So you can see here that it's not quite right. So space between doesn't look right. However, space around is going to put them exactly on the right place. And then, like as it gets, it's obviously going to get way, way more difficult. Like, let's see here. I'll go to number 19, for example. This gets a little more difficult. Now you're doing flex direction and flex wrap. And you'll learn what like flex wrap basically means that once it gets let me see if I can give you an example here. Let me go back to my code pen one time. So let's see here. So I think actually it wraps automatically, but basically what would happen here is let's see. So come on now, don't be a bitch. Flex wrap, I think. I can't remember if it's by default or what, but basically what flex wrap does is, because by default this is a sandbox, so it acts a little differently, but by default those would not wrap. Basically what would happen is it would, like really weird things would happen if you made your screen too small. And that's kind of what this right here is saying. So this is saying that you want flex wrap and you just want it to wrap. And that's what would happen if you did flex wrap. Is all of a sudden now it wraps automatically when it gets too big. So now you need to do flex direction as well. And basically tells you in the instructions, help the frogs, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to use flex direction. And if you hover over it, it tells you all the different values that flex direction has. Row reverse, column reverse. And then the same thing with wrap. You can either do wrap, no wrap, or wrap reverse. In this case, we want flex direction to definitely be column because by default they're rows. So we want it to be column. Just like that. So now you're using 2 different things. So like if, for example, we didn't use wrap at all. Let's see if I can delete that. Let's see what happens. Yeah, see, if you just do flex direction column, then it's just going to throw every single one of those all squished up and squished together in one column. And that's not what we want. We want to make sure that, we do flex wrap, for example. So this is a really, really good game here to do because it'll really help with that. I'll throw it here in... here it is right here. I'll throw it here in the messages here for you. Another really good one is, it's called Dinner Plate CSS. Let me find it. This is a really neat game. It's called CSS Diner. And basically what this right here teaches is this teaches you how to write selectors in CSS. Right? So what we're going to do here is, let's see, what do we want to happen? We want to select all this by their type A. Well, select all elements of type A. So div, P, and all different types. Let's see, what are we supposed to do? Examples. Select all div elements, P, select all P. Okay. So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to type, what is right here? Div, I guess? Oh, we want to select, table. No? What the hell are we doing here? Bento. Oh, I see what it's doing. Okay, cool. So we have a fancy plate. So basically we want to grab the fancy plate. So what we want to do essentially, and this is, again goes to ID here. So in order to grab, so we have a div with the class of table, so that's the whole table. We have plate with an ID of fancy. We have just plate, and then we have bento. So what we want to do to grab the fancy plate is we just want to grab the ID of fancy. So remember, it's a hash sign and then fancy, like that. And that grab the fancy plate. And now we want to go ahead and make sure that we grab the with the apple. And it says here, let's see. So we want to grab the apple. So in order to grab the apple, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we do a class. We want to grab the plate. And then inside the plate, we want to grab the apple, I believe, right? Yep. And that's all we wanted to grab, and so on and so forth. And this just teaches you kind of like how to write selectors and how to select like specific things in CSS. So this is really useful as well, especially in the later levels when it starts teaching you like more crazy crap. So I'll also give that to you as well. Those two games, I played the crap out of those to learn. It took a long time, but it's really, really useful stuff.
All right.
Yeah, man. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start wrapping up here. Did you have any other questions or anything?
No, I think that's about it.
All right, man.
I'll have to have a lot of this sink in, and if I have any questions, I'll shoot you a text.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went ahead and I recorded this. I'm going to go ahead and throw it up on YouTube, and I'm going to send you the link to it as well. So if at any point you want to rewatch any part of this, you can definitely do so, okay?
Okay.
All right, man. Well, you have a good night. Definitely shoot me a message or whatever if you need anything, okay?
Okay.
All right, man. Yep, no problem. Have yourself a good night, man.
All right, good night.